Good afternoon and welcome to Rubbin Minds. My name is Isabella Adediji. Now, finally, after what has been like months, the portfolios have been assigned to the ministers. Nigerians have been waiting with bated breath, and the ministers do have their work cut out for them. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, 133 million Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty. There's a lot of work that will be done. And to discuss this ministerial list, to discuss the assignment of portfolios, and just the sheer amount of work that will be required of these ministers and ministries by extension, I have with me Barrister Dotun Ajulo. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Very well. Good afternoon, Isabella. Good afternoon, audience.
Good afternoon, and thank you for honoring our invitation. Now, I don't know about you, but there was that sense of urgency by Nigerians that the president needed to hit the ground running. And it did take some time before we finally saw the list, which came in bits. And after we saw the list, finally the portfolio was assigned to the different ministers. What do you make of these, the assignment of these portfolios? Do you see round pegs in round holes? Or do you see a bit of a mismatch now that the list is finally out?
Oh, well, let me start by saying the expectation from Nigerians or by Nigerians in respect to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as far as the ministerial appointment is concerned, is premised on the fact that this is one man who, during the electionary process, what everybody was saying was antecedent. And one of his very score points was that this is a man that ran Lagos, who made Lagos better. One of the things people say about Bola Ahmed Tinubu is that this is a man that used men, that knows who is fit, who is better for whatever assignment. So you will expect less from Nigerians, because that was his score point during the campaign. However, the list took about 2 months before it came out. That was a bit of disappointment. Because
there was the expectation that he will hit
the ground running. Well, the deadline, I think it was just like 2 days to the constitutional deadline that the list was finally out. Now, at the point when the list was out, personally, I must tell you that I felt a bit uncomfortable because we saw a list whereby we have past governors, past ministers. Some of them have been governors before they became a minister. They have been ministers before they became governors.
So you saw some recycled names.
We saw recycled names and all of that, whereby everybody were expecting that we are going to have technocrats and all of that. So, but even at that, there are a lot of very commendable things about the list in itself. For the first time since 1999, this is the first time that you are going to have a list that obviously persons from opposition party came up on that list as minister. You even have an ex-governor from a supposed opposition party coming up as a ministerial nominee. Now, we've moved from that stage. That's a commendable aspect of it. That, okay, when you are talking about government of national unity, so these are some semblance of it.
So do you expect that we'll see more people from opposition parties being invited to work with this government? Does that signal just having that inclusion in the ministerial list?
Very well, very well. Let's even leave those you know on the political terrain. There is a particular, the young man that got Minister of Communication, and Bosun. Bosun is a very bitter critic of talking about Bola Ahmed Tinubu, talking about the government of APC. But I can tell you that one of the very strategic portfolio in any government is communication. So if we are to leave it on that, if we are to base it on that, yes, it is quite commendable.
Speaking about Bosun, he's the Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy. And he has a track record of working in the tech space and building the tech ecosystem.
Very well.
So do you see this as a round peg in a round hole?
Yes.
And do you see this across board, or do you see this as just
I didn't see it. It's not across board. is far from being across board. But the only thing we are saying there is we can talk about 1, 2, 3 persons, like Bosu, for whatever it is worth. We've not tried him. This is one man, a young man that I know, he has never held a public office, to the best of my understanding. But when you look at his credentials, what he does, in line with the portfolio, one has some level of hope that maybe in another 3, 4, 5, 6 months, everything will become very apparent and obvious to everybody. If indeed the president has made the right choice or not.
Okay, you know, you're speaking about communication,
yes.
And looking at some of these names, some people would have expected certain names to be in certain, to be assigned to certain portfolios. So say someone like Mr. Dele Alake, that is very big on communication, is being handed solid minerals, for example. And I can go through the list where one begins to ask questions.
I would disagree that Dele Alake has it when it comes to communication.
Even given his past experience as a journalist and the comms work he did.
Maybe you are looking at, that would mean you are looking at communication from the point whereby... Information, is different from communication. Like that of Dele Alake, for me, is a total mismatch.
And why do you say that?
Yes, a total mismatch in the sense that you are talking about solid minerals. I'm aware that Dele Alake, I think he studied something not even related to journalism. But from day one of his life, he picked up journalism as a career, and he developed himself in that area. He has been given solid mineral. For me, it's a total mismatch. That was why I said it's
not... Which
not...
other names do you see as mismatch, or which other names do you have that are...
Well, in as much as I would not want to just come on here and be bringing out names, it has more to do with... you went and give the former governor of Plateau State, Labour. This is a man who could not, in his 8 years in Plateau State, who could not take care of the affairs of civil servants in the state. That's the man who is coming up as a Minister of Labour. With what we've passed through in this country, talking about ASU strike, talking about doctors going on strike and the rest of it, it was simply because these things were not properly managed. Now, a government of Renew went and brought Simon along to come and be Minister of, and a whole lot of them. But like I've said, in as much as it's falls below expectation, we have certain commendable choice of the president. Like for me, my area of constituency is the Ministry of Justice. And I can tell you that since, let me leave it for 16 years. In the last 16 years, this is the first time any president will get it right in the appointment of Attorney General of the Federation. In the last 16 years, the choice of Lateef Fagbemi is a departure from what we're having. That office has been occupied by core politicians. But this time around, we have a lawyer who has all it takes, a rare breed, that conservative legal core legal practitioner becoming the Attorney General of the Federation. So that was why I said there are a lot of relief about the list, in as much as we felt deeply that it could be better.
And looking at this list, we've seen some new portfolios that have come up. I believe we have the blue economy and marine. We also even have, I believe it's ecological management, state environment and ecological management. And then even tourism has made a comeback, which wasn't there before. It was merged with arts and culture. What do you make of some of these new or returning portfolios?
Well, Isabella, there's one thing I want you to know. You see, ministerial portfolio. I think I mentioned this on one of the TV stations. Ministerial portfolio is secondary when it comes to what has to be delivered. You see, most of these men that are being appointed, most of the offices that you are seeing, the core persons that do the job, they are in the ministry. The core person, that's why the Daily Alake is solid mirror. When I look at it back and
But
forth.
some will argue that having politicians in some of these ministerial roles will help in managing that relationship between minister and civil service.
Very well.
That being able to almost navigate the politics of the civil service is important.
Very well. So that's the same thing I'm saying. Like, basically, these persons manning this portfolio, heading this ministry, most times it's not even all about them. They are the whim and caprices of the president. They can only carry out the mind of the president. And all they will do with that office is to leverage on the portfolio to work on the mind of the president. There is little or nothing you can do if a president is not buying into an idea of whatever your vision is like.
So the responsibility still stops at the end?
It still stops at the box of Mr. President. Aside from Attorney General of the Federation and the rest, how many of these ministers have constitution? There is nothing in the Constitution stating this is what the ministry has to do and all of that. So I
also wanted to, what do you make of the list and also its utilization of women and young people?
Well, this is one, and I believe that is very apparent to your mind. This is one of the most commendable things about the list in question. Since 1999, I think this will be the first cabinet where you are going to have a lot of women. The interesting thing, again, is that even the women you are talking about, they are young and younger people. Talking about Betty Adu and all of that. Go and even look at the portfolio assigned to them, like the bosom we've mentioned, like the man who is coming to blue economy, the BTO. These are averagely young guys, 40, 42. I think Betty Adu is 36. The list you had in the list of age that you had in the last government, I think was 44 in the government of Buhari. So that is one very impressive thing about the current cabinet. That's a total reflection of young persons and involvement of women. Look at Minister of another very interesting ministry, another very strategic ministry in any government is Ministry of Trade. Go and check the woman and the history of the woman in Ministry of Trade. Doris Onite, a medical doctor who was at some point Commissioner of Finance in Imo State, today coming up as Minister of Trade and whatever in the country. So you cannot, it's a plausible one for the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu when you talk about the young persons, the involvement of women. These are the impressive part of the list that I mentioned earlier on, that we should look and give ourselves some level of hope.
And I believe Nigerians will be looking forward to seeing how well these people perform.
It doesn't take us too long. In another 3, 4, 5 months.
We'll begin to start making judgments. Thank you very much, Barrister Dr. Ajulo, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds.
Thank you.
We will now be going on a short break. Join us again. Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Before the break, we looked at the ministerial list, in particular, the assignment of portfolios. Now we shift the conversation to the economy. Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy. And with some of the recent economical reforms, a lot of eyes are on the presidency to which way, when will Nigerians begin to get that sense of renewed hope and also reap the promised dividends of these reforms, reforms that have led to the devaluation of the Naira, that have led to the removal of subsidy, amongst others. Now, to discuss the state of the economy and what should be done to make things move a whole lot faster and ensure that that multidimensional poverty that affects as many as 122 million Nigerians is reduced. Joining me on the show is Timi Olagunju, a policy analyst. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Baba Ahmed Agbabiaka, a political analyst. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me, Sabina.
Now, I would like us to go straight into the conversation looking at the economy. Now, in the run-up to the elections, the major thing that a lot of the politicians came out to tell us is that they're going to work on the economy. And we're already beginning to see some economic reforms. Now, based on the economic reforms we've seen, does that spark in you that sense of renewed hope? Are you hopeful that you'll begin to see some of the promised dividends? I'll start with you, Timi.
Oh, well, evidence is the end of argument. And, you know, I remembered some years ago, I think 2005-06, when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu visited the University of Ibadan. I think I was in 300 level Faculty of Law. And he said that economic development is when the market woman on the street is able to feel that development in terms of the basic needs of life. But when you look at the evidence before us, that's not the case. You see that the National Bureau of Statistics recently released the result that showed the skyrocketing inflation, 22.22%. And interestingly, in that ranking, you find out that you see that in that ranking, the basic necessities of life take top priority. So number one, in terms of the general ranking, is that you see that over 11% thereabout goes to, you know, food and non-alcoholic beverages. And then next to that, interestingly, housing and other things around housing, that's electricity, gas, and all water and all that around housing. And then the third thing, which is the third basic necessity of life, according to Maslow's hierarchy, is shelter, food, clothing, right? That's clothing and footwear. Those are the three in terms of hierarchy, worst hit. And then you now come to the fourth, which is about around 1.5% thereabout, which is, interestingly, transportation. Then you have others. So when you look at it, in terms of economic reforms, right, you should expect that the evidence should guide the policy-making process of the presidency, considering the fact that this issue was further excavated by some of the economic policies and decisions of the president. For example, the announcement of the removal of subsidy, which many of his advisors have acclaimed that it was not part of what should have been in his speech, but he did that extemporaneously, you know. So those are core issues of concern that we need to look at. That's
okay, I'll let Baba Ahmed respond to that.
Well, okay, so I would like to be straight and very specific with some of these issues. Extending from where he mentioned the issue of inflation, you know, I like having this argument or putting this argument forward that Nigeria does not exist in isolation. Now, we have our peculiarities, but there are some things that are just global. It's an argument that I've always stood on. In Egypt, I specifically mentioned Egypt because it's the third largest economy in Africa. Egypt has an inflation rate of about over 31%. Ghana, I specifically mentioned Ghana because they have a similitude of happenings, economy, decisions, and other with Nigeria, and it is an oil-producing nation. And Ghana is at over 52% inflation. Now, I don't want to go into the details of the specifics in the breakdown. So, if you look at that, you want to now come into the decisions that have been taken by this president, by the new government that is just over 2 months old. From the beginning of the administration, where the president mentioned, like you said, the issue of removal of subsidy, those very genuine, very difficult but necessary decision pronouncement about the removal of fuel subsidy and the floating of the naira. Now, there's something that has happened also after that. It has shown, and that has shown the presidency or this government as being flexible and listening to the
So
yearning
a
of
government
Nigerians.
that is listening and flexible, but
yes.
how does that affect, to go back to what Timi said,
yes,
the market woman? How does that affect the
now,
number of Nigerians living in poverty? These reforms, how does that affect their day-to-day? This inflation, what's the effect of that? And does that give Nigerians a sense of renewed hope?
Okay, so this is the flexibility I'm talking about. Recently, in the last couple of days, there has been changes or adjustment to some of these things, to some of these policies, especially the removal, the subsidy removal. We heard about the $3 billion Afro-Exim Bank loan, $3 billion Afro-Exim Bank loan by NNPC to ensure that we pay a cash loan for crude, limited number of crude that will be produced in future, just for immediate attention and bringing of so-called to some of these things, especially the fact that the crude oil, PMS price has skyrocketed and is also moving with the market forces. Market forces, especially the price of crude internationally. So that has been done to ensure that the price stays the way it is, and the president has reassured again and again that the price will not go beyond what it is. Also, the floating of the naira. We have seen what has happened with the floating of the naira when the dollar was already moving. Let's forget that these are issues that all of the presidential candidates, that the front runners also campaign about. There's no magic to it. But if a presidency or if a government comes with this flexibility or with this hard, courageous decision, and they are willing to listen, the president said there won't be subsidy, but there's a similitude of that. It's not called subsidy, but just to attend to immediate concerns. Then the long-term concern was the fact that the president said by December, one of the refineries is going to be fully functional, the Port Harcourt refinery, and some of the refineries, and that is a major silver bullet in ensuring that we phase out the issue of subsidy. So also in the floating of the naira, the same thing happened. So we saw the fact that the presidency came up with decisions that ensured that Bureau de Change, they are bringing back Bureau de Change, but with much more regulation now, unlike what it used to be before. So now...
So you're speaking about the flexibility of the government and placing it as a government that listens. So
yes.
Where they feel that, well, this economic reform is causing a bit of problems for Nigerians, they're
yes.
ready to maybe go back to the drawing table and do
yes.
things differently. Now, I'll move to you, Timi, and I want us to look at the issue of our debt profile, because a lot of Nigerians are saying, why do we keep on incurring debt? We keep on incurring this debt when there are other ways to maybe find, I'll say, to recharge the economy, maybe to look inwards so that we don't have to always go borrowing, which then means that a lot of the budget goes into debt servicing. So do you agree with some of these loans that are being taken? Is that the way forward, or what should be done?
Someone, a leader in one of the first world countries said something. He said, blessed are the, in quote, I will paraphrase it, blessed are the Nigerian youths, for they shall inherit the national debts. And so that brings to mind, that particular rhetoric brings to mind the reality that when you take debts, it's not just about the now, it's also about the future. The unborn children, your children, your grandchildren, being part of the partakers of the burden of that debt. And so it behoves that in itself, debt, it's not, every country in the world takes, some kind of loan or some kind of, but then the point is, what is it used for? Then also, in pure economics, I'm a policy consultant and a lawyer, but, in economics, there's a common sense that talks about opportunity cost, right? When you look at the opportunity cost of some of these debts, as against all the alternatives, you might have cause to wonder. For example, alternative options around cost of reducing governance, has been mentioned severally. And it's not just about, when people talk about governance, it's not just about the president, the vice president, the minister, and the likes. Recently there was this talk about billions being given as, take home a package or severance package for the president and the vice president and others. But interestingly, people do not know that the president did not have more than, say, 12 million out of it, which means that the remaining billions went to a lot of aids. And so that's the challenge with Nigeria. You know, we need to really start to redefine what governance is in terms of cost-benefit ratio. Is the bicameral legislature as we operate in, does it work for us? In terms of, look at the current appointment of ministers. You know, I must commend that we did not have a lot of, you know, ministers for states this time, unlike previous governments, but I had expected that that was an opportunity to reduce the number of ministers, right? And then, because each minister and minister of states would usually have aides, you know, but that's a very good development, that there were not a lot of ministers of states, but there were a lot of ministers, and which begs the question as to the cost of governance issue, which goes to a large extent to talk to the fact that, look, once we keep towing this line, the easy path, you know, towards financing, rather than take the hard stance towards financing. History, those who forget history are doomed to repeat same, right? You look at Singapore's of this world, they did not develop their country by just going and borrowing. They developed by looking inwards and ensuring that, you know, charity begins at home. And so I think that's some key area to look at, you know, in terms of cost of governance, beyond just borrowing and all that. Yes.
Baba Ahmed, you were nodding your head. Are you in agreement that we should look inwards towards recharging the economy, and we should also reduce the cost of governance?
Yes, I totally agree with the fact that we need to reduce the cost of governance and that we need to look inwards. Now, let me just address this very important issue. You see, just like he mentioned, governance is not just about that person. It has a lot to do with decisions. Now, one of the major decisions that this government has taken, so the three of them, first one is the subsidy issue, floating of Naira, and this other one, the last one and the most important one of the very important one is the appointment of ministers. Now, there is this narrative I would like to present about the fact that looking inward has to do with manufacturing and producing what we eat, what we use, and a whole lot. And a chunk of that has to do with agriculture, agri-commodity, and the value chain of agriculture itself. A whole lot of our people, he mentioned market women the other time, let me extend it to farmers. A substantive percentage of our farmers here are peasant farmers that farm to consume and perhaps sell parts. Now, most of them are in the northern state. They are everywhere, you know, scattered even in the south and everywhere. And so, but there's the issue of security, insecurity. Most of them have been unable to go to farms, and those of them that go to farms end up selling their goods or commodities as much as 3 times the way the amount is supposed to be, because bandits and criminals tax them unofficially for them to harvest, for them to plant, for them to harvest. Now, one very important issue that I'm trying to drive in at is the issue of the appointment of the Minister of Defense. For the first time since 1999, we never had the issue of we've been having generals, retired generals as defense minister. For the first time, we're having a civilian. And everybody would be like, wow, what's happening? Why would a governor that has never carried a gun, that doesn't even know combat, be appointed as minister? Now, there's something unique about that. And referring to the Singaporean experience that he talked about, an elder statesman in Singapore made mention of the fact that they applied the acronym MPH in the development and growth of Singapore. And that is M for meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. There's pragmatism and meritocracy in the appointment of the current Minister of Defense, the minister-designate, Mohammed Badr Abubakar. Now, he has never been in the military, but he's holding this. In the entire northern states, Jigawa State for 8 years never had the issue of banditry. Agriculture has been going on, despite the fact that all the surroundings of Sokoto, Katsina, Kaduna, Zamfara, all of them have been bedeviled with banditry. But this didn't happen. Why didn't that happen? And why would this president now appoint a minister and a minister of state that does not have military background? Now, it boils to the fact that they were able, the minister, Badr, was able to ensure that that state was made peaceful. Agricultural activities were going on. There was empowerment of youth. You know, this, when we talk about military, just like we're doing in the issue of Niger Republic, we're talking about carrot and stick. There's a lot of carrot that needs to be done. We have a lot of Tucano jets and all that, military hardware. But
so
we need to apply.
A different
So this approach now has to do with the fact that we need somebody that has that experience and exposure that can, for a fact, he was chairman of the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative. So somebody that has been in the agricultural sector, that has been governor, that secured the state, there's a need to come and replicate that at the center, at the federal level. And that is what I believe the president has seen in him. So that departure is one of the ways that I feel this government is trying to address the issue of enough of agriculture and looking inwards to produce what we eat and reduce the cost, the forex that we spend in importing what we can produce here.
Timmy, I would like you to weigh in on your policy experience and to also touch on the role of agriculture and maybe other natural and human resources, because we have the issue of Japa, which is the migration of a lot of Nigerians to the United Kingdom, to Canada, to even Australia and so many other countries. So what kind of policies should this government be putting in place beyond some of the ones we've discussed already to supercharge the economy?
The word supercharge almost gets me, you know, worried in the sense of the fact that, you know, common sense is really not common sense, which is the fact that, you know, you talked about the military. And I would want to give a practical example, you know, the policy direction that the president had taken needs to be rejigged. And I say this in the sense of the fact that, you see, some of the policies that were taken, for example, policies around, you know, floating of the Naira and around the CBN, and even policies around, you know, what's it called, subsidy removal, are policies that could have been taken in the consensus of a council. Because, you see, conversation enriches the understanding. When the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Trade and Investment brings their head together, and then you're able to consider the different angles, you know, into shaping policy making, because there's something called the policy environment. And so the fact that such monumental policy decisions were taken by the president without a council, a federal executive, FEC, goes to show to a large extent whether these particular ministers would really have a say, or they would just be a dot on the cake in that sense. And that's a core challenge, you know. That's a very core challenge, because some of those policies, when you look at them, for example, the military, right? There was the 2023 budget for the military was about 1.3 trillion naira. And as at the time when it was at that rate, right, certain procurements and contracts had been made. And
so we need to see the president not working in isolation, but working with his ministers, working with his cabinet.
Precisely.
So that
that's the first.
Unfortunately, we'll have to bring this conversation to an end. But we say thank you, Timi Olagunju, a policy analyst, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds. And thank you again, Baba Ahmed Agbabiaka, a political analyst. We'll be going on a quick break here on Rubbin Minds. Do join us again. Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Now, for our entertainment segment, our focus moves to Nollywood. Now, there's been a lot of expectation and hope in the air that just as Afrobeat has become a major export for Nigeria, you go all over the world and you hear Nigerian music. There's that expectation that Nollywood's time has come, that we'll go all over the world and our films will be watched. And when we look at the coming of more streamers into Nigeria, as well as cable TV operators, as well as cinemas, then there's a lot of hope that this will become a reality in the foreseeable future. Now, to discuss the film industry, look at the cinemas, look at the streaming platforms, and generally Nollywood, I have with me Julie Akor, a creative entrepreneur. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for honoring our invitation. Now, when you look at Nollywood, do you believe Nollywood has that potential and has what it takes to be the Afrobeat in the music world? Can we really penetrate the US, Canada, all over the world the way our music has done?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm a huge fan of Afrobeat, so it's interesting because being a filmmaker myself, I've also had the chance to look into the industry and try to understand what works, why that went as viral as it did. And I think what stood out for the musicians at the time is the authenticity and standing true to what they believed. Even at the time when it wasn't recognizable sound, it was still, fuzzy, but there were people who stood their grounds. And if you look at the industry in Nollywood, do we have such people? Do we have people who are telling stories so authentically that it's different from, just what's general or what's stereotypical? And yes, we do have those people, and that's what's even giving me so much joy, knowing that the presence of the strength, the resilience, and the authenticity is in the industry. It's just for us to tap into it. And then, with the consistency that the Afrobeat artists add, we definitely have that chance to be as successful, if not even more.
Okay. Now, when you say Afrobeat, if you hear an Afrobeat song, you'll know. Yeah. If you hear an Amapiano song or a reggae song or classical music, you'll be able to recognize it. Yeah. Do you feel that we have what is an authentic Nollywood style, an authentic Nollywood genre? Or some will argue that some of what we're seeing in Nollywood is basically what has been done in Hollywood, and we just put it in a Nigerian setting. Now, when you look at Bollywood, on the other hand, there are certain things that make a Bollywood movie a Bollywood movie. So do we have those things to make it an authentic Nollywood movie?
Yeah. So your first question, if there is a Nollywood genre, if there is a style, some film scholars in the industry would say yes. There are some patterns when you compare a couple of films. There is also a very dramatic energy to what they call a Nollywood film, and it resonates with audiences. And when there's that connection, then it's a thing. So I would say to a large extent, yeah, there could be something we call the Nollywood genre. But beyond that is that there are diverse voices within the industry. So yes, we do have that energy, but we also have the auteurs, we have the people coming in with their unique perspectives. And so long that the industry allows those different voices to thrive, then we can watch and see which stands out. But at the core of it, storytelling is universal. If I'm telling you something here, I'm talking about a child and a mom, whatever emotion it evokes in you, it should be able to evoke that same emotion, even you are in Sweden or you're in Australia. So if we are able to understand those basics, I think, yeah, definitely that our stories can stand out.
Now, I'd like to look at the issue of language. So a lot of those, say, Indian movies, they're not in English, so we read the subtitles. And for growing up in this country, we would watch, say, Mexican soap operas, Portuguese soap operas in their language, and then we're just seeing the English subtitles. So do you feel that filmmakers in the industry are ready to take that risk to go all out and do movies in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Hausa, but in other languages like, say, Ijo, Urobo, Birom, or even languages that are not seen as, say, mainstream?
Yeah, I hope that we are thinking like that. Personally, I am. I really love our original languages. I look forward to making a film in my language, Nesako. But also we do have films in Igbo, in Yoruba, in Hausa, and probably started from that anyway. So I think what we need to do more is do it with more intentionality and not just doing it just to sound different. We're doing it with a concept that I'm portraying this glorious Nigerian personality, this character that embodies this experience, right? So like Mami Water, for example, it's a recent film by C.J. Obasi. It embodies the authenticity, but it's not a particular language. It embodies the African glory, and I'm so proud of that work. And it did that with language, but the language didn't have to be, like you said, mainstream or, you know, conventional. It's all about crafting the story with an intention. So if we do have the intention, if the language pushes your intention forward, go for it. If the language is just there and makes no, then you are doing, you're just doing it for doing sake, and that's still going to fall off the wayside. Yeah.
Okay. I know some filmmakers are striving to do it in the local language because of the consideration at the Oscars, because that's a major requirement. But now I want us to look at distribution, because for many years, Nollywood has been bedeviled by the pirates. It's been one issue or the other. We don't have enough cinemas, or we have limited streamers. What do you make of the coming of, say, foreign streamers, the cinema culture in Nigeria? Do you feel that these are enough to give enough outlets for distribution, or more needs to be done? And if more needs to be done, in what area? Do we need more streamers? Do we need more cinemas, for example?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because money is such an important metric, you know, in measuring the success of a film as well. It's one-off. And streaming platform has really given us a chance to see other options, right? Creating different avenues to make your income. Whether or not it's enough, it's still a growing industry. The cinema culture is small, but it could be better if it could be bigger if there are lots more options. I don't think we have enough cinema that can cater to, you know, the people who want to go to the cinema. And for the streaming platform as well, there is still a lot more people that could access it, right? But what I have noticed is that they serve different people. And if we are able to recognize what other method can we serve the other, you know, the audiences that we've not connected with, because Nigeria is a very unique industry, it's a very unique country in itself, and it reflects in our industry too. So there are people who can afford to do the cinema, there are those who can afford to do the streaming. There are other ways to reach those, because everyone wants to be entertained. Everyone loves a good story. So story should not be a luxury, but find a way to reach those people and still make income from there. So I would say that the presence of these streamers have told us there can be other avenues. Probably look inward, create as much that you can, and maintain, you know, the ones that you already have, the cinemas. The cinemas are not going to replace streaming. Streaming is not going to replace cinema. They all offer different experiences.
Interesting that you say one doesn't replace the other. I would like you to go back to the issue of money, because at the end of the day, an industry like Nollywood requires injection of capital. Films are expensive to produce. TV series are expensive to produce. And they also offer the opportunity of creating employment. So how well will you rate Nollywood in contributing economically to Nigeria and also reducing unemployment?
101%. I rate us doing well. You know, when the industry was paid the least attention to, when, you know, no funding was going in there, it spent years giving employment, giving hope, giving, you know, making use of time and resources in form of humans, right? And that has given so many people a sense of belonging, and that they connect to a community and they can make money from that community. So yes, the industry serves people. It's employed millions of entrepreneurs. It's given, without having so much barrier to entry. So the talent is there. But, you know, it's also a bit haphazard. It started that way because everyone is trying. We just created little silos to serve ourselves. But now I think we are doing more intentionality in creating the structure that will help talents, that would help crew members, that would help you, funders and those looking for funds. There's a wide gap here. I would not say that we've gotten it figured out, but yeah, that's where people like us, you know, young filmmakers, creative entrepreneurs that are thinking about the solutions that would bring in the structure for a more long-term benefit for the industry. Yeah, that's what we need to do.
So we still need a lot more capital injection into the industry.
Yes, we need a lot more, but my point is that we need to look at creating the structure where...
When you say creating the structure, we have a new government and we have new ministers, and I believe that all eyes are on the minister. I'll say arts and culture, that's that could be the ministry that a lot of film and music and that kind of thing goes under. Now, what are your expectations from this government? What can this government be doing in terms of policy, in terms of even provision of that structure you're talking about, or capital, or what can they do, or what should they be doing to ensure that this industry really develops to its full potential?
Yeah, thank you for that. There is a lot the government can be doing. You know, if you compare to other industries that are thriving, the government have been more. They are more intentional about the entertainment industry. There are funds that the filmmakers can access. They push for collaborations, policies that allow for international other filmmakers to want to collaborate or co-produce with their own countries. So these are the things that I feel our government should look at when you have funds that is accessible by the professionals in this industry. You create policies that protect their interests, and then there is avenue to grow the talent, because for the longest, a lot of us have just had to do so many things ourselves, learn by self-learn. So the institutions are not a lot, but you could see with even the Lagos state government and some certain production studios, they've collaborated in creating facilities for people to study and learn more about this craft. So these are I hope that the industry, the government that we have now is going to be intentional about investing in this entertainment industry, because it has its most vibrant energy exists there. We see it in the music industry as well. So if your vibrant energy exists here, you want to keep them alive. You want to keep them excited. You want to keep them motivated. And these are the things that would actually work. Those policies, those funding, yes, we could definitely do that.
And now when you look at Nollywood, there are different factions in Nollywood. You have like the Yoruba-speaking Nollywood. You have the Nollywood that goes to the cinema. You have the Asaba Nollywood. You have, you have almost like different grades of these films. And when you look at the box office or streaming numbers, a lot of times we still see that preference for foreign movies. We still see that preference for movies that look like they were made abroad, as opposed to those, say, very indigenous movies. So what can be done to also get Nigerians patronizing Nigerian movies? Nigerians paying their subscriptions to streamers to watch Nigerian movies, or going to the cinema and seeking out Nigerian movies?
Thank you. I initially said that we have such a very unique audience sect. Even, but when you say we have these different creators, these different producers, they are not, I don't see one as a segment that is outside of, personally, I think that they're catering to an existing audience, and sometimes it can, interchange. We've seen that with some of Funke Akindele's movie where, box office story, and everyone is going to see it in the cinema that, probably we're not used to seeing in the cinema. So, but then there are formats, right, of films. Some formats are made for cinema, some formats are made straight to TV, some formats are made for streaming. When you consider the format and create your film in accordance with that format, then you are, indeed being cautious about your end goal, your target audience, right? So there are times when there's some really amazing stuff you find on YouTube. I mean, I watched it, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but this movie...
So it's looking at your intended audience,
yes,
and
your target.
looking at how best to serve them
Exactly.
and on what platform. Thank you so much, Julie Ako, for sharing your contributions on Nollywood.
Thank you for
on
having
Rubbin
me.
Minds.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And that's where we will be wrapping up this edition of Rubbin Minds. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Isabella Adediji. Join us again next week. Goodbye.